My name is Councillor Dan Roper. I'm Chair of the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee. I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting. This meeting is being held in person at County Hall and is also being streamed live on the County Council's YouTube channel. I do understand there are some issues with the live stream in that they might not be focusing in on individual speakers. So if I'm saying your name a bit more in this meeting than I would normally, it's for the benefit of the viewing public. A fire alarm is not expected during the meeting. If the alarm sounds, we must evacuate County Hall. In the event of an emergency, please make your way to the nearest exit and meet at the muster point located in the main car park. Okay, number 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have an apology today from Councillor Simon Ring. It's also my duty to note that following the resignation of Councillor Keith Kiddy, there is now a Conservative vacancy on the Select Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I also understand that the Cabinet Member, Councillor Margaret Dewsbury, isn't able to attend this morning. She has another engagement and sends her apologies. Committee, I think we'd all like to send our best wishes to Keith Kiddy. He's been a stalwart member of this committee and scrutiny beforehand, and I'm sure we all wish him well in how things are at the moment. I'm sure he's got better things to do than be watching a YouTube of a council meeting at the moment. But if we could minute that, we wish him well, please. Item number 2 is minutes of the meeting on Wednesday the 22nd of October. Can we take those as a correct record? But I understand Councillor Kemp has a point.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I do remember saying that when we were talking about the policy framework, that the waste strategy and policies are part of them, and they also include this Council's policy on no incineration in Norfolk.
I think members raised a number of points which were contained within that policy framework. We didn't really drill down into the details of what those items were. I'm in the hands of the committee whether or not anybody else has a similar recollection to Councillor Kemp on that. Okay. In terms of that, if we could merely perhaps change that a member raised details about that particular item and just include one line in the minutes, would that satisfy you, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Absolutely fine, thank you. Subject to that small change, are we agreeing with the minutes? Thank you very much indeed. Item 3 is updates from the Chair. I've got no updates. Item number 4, any declarations of interest in the room, councillors? I see none. Item number 5, public question time. There are no public questions received today. Item number 6, local member questions. Again, no local member questions. Which takes us to item number 7, which is Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service Statement of Assurance 2024-25. And I'd like to introduce the Chief Fire Officer to introduce that, please.
Is this on? Is this working? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Statement of Assurance covering the financial year of April 2024 to the 31st of March 2025 reflects our statutory commitment to transparency and accountability, as well as our shared dedication to delivering an effective, professional and compassionate forward-thinking fire service for the people of Norfolk. In accordance with the Fire and Rescue National Framework for England, this statement provides information on how Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service has fulfilled its financial, governance and operational responsibilities. It sets out how we are meeting the priorities defined in our Community Risk Management Plan, responding to the expectations of His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, and ensuring that we are continuing to deliver an efficient and effective value for money service. It also provides high-level updates on how we are implementing recommendations from national incidents, national learning and major events. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions on this item, please? Councillor Bambridge.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to say to the Chief Fire Officer, thank you for a very good report. And I'm sure I've asked this question before, but I will ask it again so that it is minuted. But are you adequately funded for your, your extensive resources and staff?
Yes, so I think we covered this at the CRMP session a few weeks ago. I think probably what I would say is that because 60% of our firefighters are on-call firefighters, that represents a variable cost, which means it goes up and down depending on how busy we are. We have had a particularly busy summer period, considerable number of fires in the open due to hot weather events, and that is putting current in-year pressure on our budget. So I wouldn't say we're inadequately funded, but I would say there is variability depending on the demand that we have. The other thing that is currently causing a slight concern is how we plan towards devolution. So the devolution costs currently are not yet confirmed to be funded from MHCLG, but I have written to them to outline what I think that transition will look like and to request that that's picked up. So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee? I've got, sorry, the leader wishes to come in.
Just on that, the point that the Chief Fire Officer has just made about the devolution and the fact that the Norfolk and Suffolk Fire Service is now going to be wrapped into that from the 1st of April 2027. We did make some representations to MHCLG to say, is there any way that that could be delayed, because we are quite unique in that we have these two separate fire services and they're part of the county councils. It doesn't happen like that in a lot of other areas where the fire service is separate and they can just lift and shift it. We have to disaggregate from trading standards, for example. So there's an awful lot of complexities in that, and the two fire services run in quite different ways. They have listened to us, but the timetable remains the same. So I suppose the best we can hope is that we get some capacity funding to help us do that. Otherwise, it's going to be a cost on both councils, and I don't think that's fair.
Thank you for that clarification, Leader. Councillor Kildare-Morris.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Fire Officer, for that report. I've enjoyed reading it. There's a couple of points I'd like to make. You've increased your home visits by an incredible amount, 71% over a year, which I find exactly incredible and very good work. How have you done that? Have you put more resources to it, or have you got more intelligence about where to target those visits? And I do have one more, if I may. There is a piece in here about the fatal accidents. Unfortunately, the 40 over the years period. Is that under 34? 9 fatalities, 34 to 59, 13, and over 60s, 18 fatalities. Does that anywhere near the demographic that we're looking at in this county in terms of the number of drivers that we've got in those particular age groups, or is it something slightly different? And I'll just make one comment. Are you recruiting dogs? Because there are an awful lot of dogs in those photographs.
I'll come back to the dog question. In terms of the home fire safety visits, we have put a concerted effort into making sure that we're getting out to those people who are most vulnerable. We had an investment, I think it was back in 2021, following the previous HMI inspection, of around £240,000 from the County Council into our prevention activities. So that helped us to set up a core infrastructure around some dedicated individuals to do those visits. But the real increase has been because we have trained all of our fire crews, both whole time and on call, around how to do those home fire safety interventions, and that's what's allowed us to have that significant increase. We do very targeted, focused visits, both on areas of deprivation, areas where we know that there are individuals who might fit our profile of likely to be at risk. But we also take significant numbers of referrals from other agencies, so that might be the district and borough councils, adult social care, and as I mentioned in the last committee that I was at, we have been part of the falls prevention trial within adults as well. So all of those things in combination have allowed us to make that significant increase year on year in terms of how we're addressing home fire safety visits. As I've mentioned, if we're busy operationally, that number can drop because it's only the dedicated team that would be able to carry on in those periods, because all of our firefighters would obviously be attending operational incidents. So it can be a little bit variable depending on how busy we are. But yeah, we're very proud of how much we've increased that activity. In In terms of the RTCs and the sad numbers of fatalities that we do see on Norfolk's roads, I would need to go away and look at a comparison against demographic groups. What I would say is that traditionally the focus for fatalities has been on younger people, and I think we are seeing an increase in older people being involved in these types of incidents for a whole range of reasons, sometimes medical episodes, but we have, as the report sets out, done some older driver kind of safety campaigns with public health and trying to encourage people to make sure that they're fit and well when driving and to get themselves retested where appropriate when they hit that age. We have also done our first RTC fatal review with multi-agencies. This is a practice we've had on fatal fires for a number of years, and we're now starting to take that into the road traffic accident scenario with different partners to say, you know, could we have improved outcomes if something had been done differently by one or more of the partners? So I'm hoping that will give us some real focused information and ways forward to help anyone who finds themselves in that unfortunate situation. And the dogs, yes, we do like dogs. So we have one search and rescue dog who is our working dog. That's Axel. So he's he's featured on a number of pages. But we also have our OK9 dogs who are there for wellbeing support, and those are the dogs of members of the fire and rescue community who go out and help people to debrief from traumatic incidents. But yeah, we do like a dog.
Thank you. Nothing to come back. Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, it's a very good report, all of the things that you're doing, and the fact that it's a risk-based inspection and audit programme, and you've identified particular areas that you're working on that are at risk, care homes, schools and the nighttime economy. Could you tell us more about what you're doing there? And I've got just a couple of other things as well. Thanks.
Yeah, so a lot of the focused work of our protection team has been in response to some of the recommendations coming out of the both the Grenfell reports. So we've been doing a lot of work with medium and high-rise buildings, identifying and making sure that remediation is happening in those buildings. Again, we will take referrals around fire safety. But the risk-based inspection programme, as with other parts of the council who have enforcement activities, first and foremost our responsibility is to identify those premises, but also then to work with business owners, care home owners, or anyone else to help them understand why those kind of rules and recommendations are in place and help them to come up to standards. So we will always try and work with people, try and help them to improve before we go anywhere near an enforcement activity, because most people want to have safe premises for themselves and for whoever might be working or living in those environments. So it's quite a comprehensive programme that probably can't go into the full level of detail here, but we have again tried to increase the number of people that we have focused on that, and that has been supported by some government grants as well.
And as the second point, looking at the number of women who are being recruited to be firefighters, whether whole time or on call, they're not very many. What are you doing to try and encourage women to become firefighters?
So we have run a number of activities to try and increase the visibility of women across our service and to make the role more achievable and attainable for women in Norfolk. We've run a couple of open sessions across different fire stations and encouraged people to come along and try out the role. In our most recent recruitment campaign, we have attracted around 25% of applicants as women. Now, what we usually see is that as we go through the stages of the recruitment process, we will see a higher rate of dropout from female applicants, but we've changed our whole approach this time, putting in things like mentoring and buddying systems as people go through to help people retain their confidence through the process. So I'm very pleased to say that the cohort we've now ended up with for new whole-time firefighters is still at 25%, so we haven't seen the dropout that we did in previous years. So we need to keep up the conversation with Norfolk communities about how firefighting and the professional support services can be a great career for women as well as men. But I'm really pleased with how we've improved that process for the recent recruitment drive.
One very quick follow-up, making sure that the makeup of the fire service reflects all areas, areas of deprivation. I know in one area, I think in the Midlands, they'd actually said that people didn't need to have a driving licence because that was a barrier to people from more deprived areas. Do we know what our the makeup of our the fire service is for socio-economic groups and what we're doing to equalise everything?
We actually did pick up on the driving licence issue a few weeks ago because Merseyside have also implemented that. So we do not require any of our on-call firefighters to absolutely have a driving licence when they enter the service, but we did put it in as a recruitment criteria for whole time. Driving is a core part of the firefighter role map, and therefore that is something that is kind of key to being a firefighter, but we are currently looking at that because we do realise it can be a barrier because it's so expensive these days for people to learn to drive. So it's a really good point, Councillor Kemp. I don't have a full solution around that yet, but we are certainly looking at it, and it's not a full prerequisite for on-call.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Price, then Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. I'll fire off the first one. The Statement of Assurance confirms that the Fire and Rescue Service operates under the County Council's governance framework with oversight from both Cabinet and scrutiny. Given the report notes that the new Strategic and Corporate Select Committee will now assume the scrutiny function, could you clarify how the committee will be given regular, transparent access to performance data, such as incident learning and compliance outcomes, to ensure ongoing independent scrutiny rather than sort of retrospective reporting? Thank you.
Yeah, so to date we've had a group called the Strategic Development Oversight Group, which is not a formally constituted committee but is a representative group that's chaired by Margaret Dewsbury and does have representatives from most political parties on there who do exactly as you've said, kind of look at things a little bit more real time. I would be very comfortable with bringing that information here as and when is appropriate and as the Chair sees fit, and I think that increased transparency would be a good idea. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the answer, and I'm sure the committee, the Chair will respond to that, and I'm sure we would appreciate that. But I'll move on to my other question. The report states that the National Resilience Assurance Team initially judged Norfolk's preparedness as inadequate in January 2025 before improving to requires improvement by February. Can the officer explain what internal governance weaknesses allowed the initial shortfall to occur, and what assurance can we give residents that future compliance issues will be detected and addressed before an external audit identifies them?
So this is the National Resilience information on page 27. Yeah, so the way that the National Resilience assets work requires additional training and skills for our firefighters, and due to a number of changes in the service, some of the high-risk non-compliance areas, we only had one that was actually non-compliant at that time, which we then moved quite quickly to being compliant. This is actually quite a good score compared to other fire and rescue services. So what I don't have in here is the benchmark to others that have that national resilience capability. It's something that we feel is very important for Norfolk, and you'll remember some conversations about our urban search and rescue team that form part of that. So I wouldn't say there was necessarily a failure in internal governance around this. I think it was a combination of factors, but we do have now a much more stringent audit and regular tracking approach. But again, if that's something that people would like to see brought more frequently, then we can definitely do that.
I'll just come back on that point. I think receiving that information, because we have a scrutiny function, again, is valuable, Chair. I think compliance is just as important as sort of setting a process before. So obviously, you know, technically that was the weakness in the compliance, and I'm sure you'll be addressing compliance in future audits. But I think the information will be useful. Thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. On page
29 of our agenda, page 11 of the document, there's reference made, there's a nice photograph of some water, and it says within Norfolk we have 90 miles of coastline, which is probably about right, and 125 miles of waterways and over 60 inland waters. And what's the definition of a waterway? Because I've got over 125 miles worth of waterways in my division, and I would think we may have got 125 miles possibly of main rivers or navigable rivers, but I think we might be selling short the amount of water we have around with all the network of drains, smaller rivers and unadopted water courses, because somebody could fall in and need rescuing, or a car recovering from, people recovered from any of those water bodies and could, facilitate the need for a rescue. And I just wondered if we were selling ourselves short on the amount that there is out there, and whether the waterways there is by definition navigable waterways. In other words, the ones that you'd probably go up and down in a boat.
I assume that is what it is, Councillor Long, but I will go and check, because you're certainly right. We do have a lot of water, and 125 miles sounds inconsistent with the amount that's there. So I will definitely go and check that figure. I think we also are fully aware that during times of heavy rainfall, we can also see some of our roads turn into waterways. We've had that conversation before around the fords and how treacherous they can become during different weather patterns. So it's sometimes not a fixed answer, but I would definitely check the wording on that. Thank you.
Councillor Pogson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just really to, I suppose, to pick up on what's been said about the forward look we've had with the CRMP and now this from the backward look. I think it gives us a really good picture of what is certainly a highly visible and respected service as well. Just 2 points, really. One is the issue about what we need to bring back as our role of strategic and corporate. So I think that's been noted already. But just one suggestion, really. There's a very interesting and meaningful graphic on page 42 of the agenda, which is page 24 of the report. And that would have been quite useful perhaps earlier on, sort of setting the scene of what's been attended, and also the resources as well, with the number of staff. It does show the extent of the work that's been done. But that apart, I think this demonstrates what the fire service has actually done and on its journey to improvement as well.
Yeah, thank you. And we have actually since then done some additional analysis plotting the activity for this year. And over the last 5-year period, so compared to kind of 21, 22, month on month, we are on average 98% busier than we were 5 years ago. So that's not necessarily 98% incidents, but it's about how we then need to move some of our resource dynamically around the county when we're at an incident to make sure we've got sustainable fire cover or accident cover. So I can definitely make sure that type of information is more proactively shared with this committee, so you've got more of a real-time picture of how the dynamics for the service are changing.
Thank you. There are no other councillors indicating. So thank you for your contributions on this item. I think from what we've heard in the room, we're happy with the document as is put in front of us. Perhaps subject to a minor revision about the figures on waterways, which Councillor Long has raised, but I don't think that's material to the document in total. I think we've all noted the point about future scrutiny, and we've got the item later on the agenda for the forward work plan, and I think that's the time to think about when we want to next visit the fire service. I had a conversation with the Chief Fire Officer before we came into this meeting, and she mentioned the particular action plans which are taking place on Grenfell and Manchester Arena, which again is something which we might want to tie into a future item when we come to the forward work plan later on. But that's for later. As it stands, committee, are we content to go with the recommendation, which is to approve the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service Statement of Assurance 24-25? That's agreed. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Chief Fire Officer. Item 8 is local government reorganisation, preparing for transition, update on planning and decision-making context. We've got a report in front of us from the Chief Executive, and we've got the leader to present, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think local government reorganisation is not something that any of us anticipated. It certainly wasn't in the manifesto of the government before they came to power. It's coming to us on top of devolution, on top of our scheduled elections, and on top of doing our day job. So we're just trying to get ahead of the game here. So there's lots that we can do ahead of the actual decision on how many unitary authorities Norfolk will see for the future. So today we have a presentation which is to bring everybody up to speed on what happens next, and it will give you an insight into the enormous amount of work that we and our officers are going to have to do in order to set up the new system as we move forward.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman, and we'll just wait for the slides to come up. What we plan to do is just, you have got the slides in your pack, but we'll talk through and we'll pause for questions whenever it is helpful for you to do that. Just to put a disclaimer on what we're about to say as well, obviously what we're talking about does not assume any decision, doesn't assume what the government's going to do. They're very neutral about what may happen, but equally the government have not given us a definitive list of what the next stages will be. So this is taken from what's happened in other areas, what's happened in other authorities, the things government have said in their FAQs. So I think it's a really good picture of what's very likely. However, of course, government could decide to do things differently this time. So just to have that disclaimer on it. A reminder of the government's timetable. Again, this is the government's own published indicative timetable. We're still very much on the left-hand side. So stage one was the letter the government wrote to local authorities. You'll be aware stage two, the submissions are in with government. About to move into stage 3 as soon as government confirm when their consultation date starts. So very much still on the left-hand side, still a long way to go to vesting day, still an awful lot of work to do. Just to talk briefly about how at an officer level we've sort of organised work at the moment. So you'll be aware, and we've had a couple of discussions here before about the work on the development of business cases, getting ready to submit those to government. That's the left-hand box. Obviously, we continue to engage with government, particularly as their consultations start, so they will have questions for us and vice versa, I'm sure. The other two boxes really signal what the leaders just talked about, which is whatever the outcome from government, there is work to be done to transition from where we are now, the model of governance we have now with 8 authorities, to whatever model the government decide is the best way forward. Therefore, there is a huge amount of work to be done, whatever the outcome, and we've started the early stages of that now. We don't want to miss the 6 months we've got between the submission and the government's decision. That's, you know, that's a long period of time to get things done together in. So we've started doing work internally at Norfolk County Council, and we've started doing absolutely very similar, in lots of cases exactly the same, work with our district colleagues. So we're working together as a system, in particular to pull data together, you know, lists of contracts, do that discovery piece so that when we have a decision, we can move forward quite quickly from a shared knowledge base and to be very strong to get these things done. What we're going to talk through today, and I'll come back to this, is just the different phases of things that will happen through to vesting day, and I will come back to this slide in a bit. And in particular, some of the key things and the key elements of decision making that there will be, again, just to make sure that we can get a common language, so when we talk about things, you know what we mean when we talk about it, and a bit of a common understanding of the core things that will be coming our way. So if we just start with minded to decision. So in March, we will get from the Minister a minded to decision, not necessarily a final decision, it's a minded to decision. So the Minister will consider all the proposals and the consultation findings from the government's consultation and decide on a way forward and let us know. It's a minded to decision because actually it requires parliamentary approval and legislation to do it. So at that stage in March, the government is telling you they're minded to do this, and then they will then move forward to lay the right legislation. So if we say minded to decision, we do mean the Minister telling us in March what they want to do. As I said, it requires legislation to enact whatever the Minister's minded to decision is. That's through something called a structural changes order. So government will lay, there are two terms, if something gets laid and it gets made, they will lay that legislation with Parliament, so that's the laying of it. Parliament will then have time to consider it, and when they approve it, it's then made. And there's a period between, so the government timetable is they will lay the legislation, hopefully before the summer recess, is what their indicative timetable says. But the making of it, the approval of it, won't be until the autumn. So there's a bit of a period in between. The structural changes order is a really key document. So that's the document that will talk about, for example, what the new council or councils will be, what they'll be called, what areas they will cover, which councils are being abolished, what the election arrangements will be, how many seats there will be, what the divisions will be, what the term will be for the people who are elected. It will cover ceremonial arrangements where it needs to, so the arrangements we know it needs to cover some things to make sure things like Lord Mayors are protected in the county and that those roles don't stop. It will also talk about what transition arrangements government require, so shadow authorities, which we'll talk about in a moment, joint committees. So it's a really important thing, and it will start to set out some actions that they want. So it will start to say you need to have an implementation plan agreed by. The SCOs in other areas, they're all in the public domain. They're not huge documents. They tend to be about 10 pages if you wanted to look any up, and we're happy to share links, but they are all public documents from other areas. There will undoubtedly be things that in the first lane of the legislation are forgotten about, and there will be a mop-up version of that before vesting day, so there'll be another bite. So there will be some really historical things, probably in relation to port ownership or something like that, that will come up through the process of transition that requires us to go back. Probably the most famous example is one authority not that long ago forgot about their city status for their city when they did their structural changes order, and actually on vesting day their city did not have city status. It was picked up again after that and obviously reinstated very, very quickly, but there's just a huge amount of things we don't want to forget, and there will be mop-up legislation after the structural changes order if there is anything else that comes up. As I said, the structural changes order will set out some of the governance arrangements that are required. The first thing it will say is establish joint committees, so they're member-led bodies. That will be prior to a shadow authority, which we'll talk about in a moment because it won't have had elections yet. So that is a body. There will be one of those for each of the new legal entities that has been set up. So if it's one council, one joint committee. If it's two, there'll be two joint committees. And if it's three new councils, there'll be three joint committees. The members will be drawn from existing elected members. The division of seats on those joint committees will be set out in the structural changes order. So that will tell you how many seats will come from which authority. It will also tell you who will chair it. So it will say, you know, the leader of X current council will chair it, and the order will tell you which authorities will essentially host those bodies, because somebody has to host it, look after it, make sure all the meetings happen, publish the papers, etc. So that's the first one that will come round. There'll be an expectation when the order is made, so when it's approved, that they are set up quite quickly. Usually says within 2 weeks, we want this set up, a new meeting and getting on with it. It will have a number of things that it needs to do. Its primary role is to get things ready for the shadow authority. So its primary role is keep transition moving and get everything prepared that a shadow authority is going to need to do. So, for example, we know a shadow authority is going to have to agree an implementation plan. That's the main document that is going to set out how you get to vesting day. So this joint committee, one of the roles will be to say, you need to get all of that ready. So there's stuff to do here. There'll be a number of appointments that the shadow authority will need to make. So, for example, it'll need to appoint a monitoring officer really quickly, again, within the first couple of weeks. Again, this joint committee can get on with it. Plus, no doubt, we'll want to oversee lots of officer work on transition because it will be a big programme. After that, it will be a shadow authority, which is the one thing I think most people are more familiar with. So that will be, there will be a set of elections, a number of members will be elected, they will form the elected members of the new authority or authorities. The shadow authority will be then drawn from those members, and what the SCO has said in other areas is, okay, have your elections, and as soon as you've got your members, you need to elect a leader, set up a cabinet system, and get going with your meetings straight away. So then we'll be into the realms of, you know, member code of conduct, member allowances need to be agreed, scrutiny arrangements, remuneration panels. So a number of things need to happen quite quickly. This is the body that will oversee transition. So where's the body that will have an implementation plan that says to get to vesting day, we need to do all these things, and it will need to make sure all those things happen. Elected members as now, so members are twin hatters now, so you can be elected to the county council and a district council, and yes, you could be elected to the shadow authority and be a triple hatter at the same time. It will have, as I said, a number of responsibilities, including all those things, and there are some big things in there that will be tricky and will require a bit of time. For example, setting a budget for new authorities will be a big thing that needs to be done. The shadow authority will need to carry out a public consultation on its budget before it sets its budget, for example. So lots to get done and lots to plan for. The implementation plan, as I said, will be one of the things government requires shadow authorities and therefore joint committees to work on and to have. It will have some deadlines for it. Again, implementation plans in other areas are available in the public domain, because they've been through public meetings. That's the document that will talk about not just what the governance arrangements will be, but also what are the top 100 or top the actions that are needed for vesting day, how are they going to approach, what's the approach the authority wants to take to council tax harmonisation, aggregation of services, disaggregation of services, all of those things. So it will be a real driving document. Vesting day. Vesting day is the day the new authority or authorities start. That will be the 1st of April 2028. The other councils, so all the other councils will be abolished at the same time, and the statutory change order, that's the language it uses. It abolishes councils and it creates councils. That is the day that the new authorities then take on responsibility for the full range of services, and the other councils no longer exist, so everything's got to have transferred. Vesting day for us will be on a Saturday, which will bring with it some challenges operationally that will need to be planned for as well. And also assets and liabilities, again, just an indication of all the pre-work needed. They'll all transfer, so we'll need to reach agreement on what transfers over. I'll just go back again. So whilst the councils start, one of the things we also need to do whilst building new council or councils and getting ready for vesting day is close down the existing bodies. So there's also a stream of work where you have to close down these existing councils, close the accounts. Those two things will overlap each other. So we won't have closed the County Council's accounts in its last year on the 31st of March, the last day of the financial year, not possible. Therefore, we've got to think about some overhang transitional arrangements for important things like that still need to happen. And then the last term, and then we'll talk a bit about timetables, is a Section 24 direction. So government have already said they are going to do this. Essentially, a Section 24 direction is a direction from government that's trying to protect shadow authorities from inheriting things that it's inappropriate to inherit. So it's asking current authorities to think carefully about their spend and where there's spend that's not in the medium-term financial strategy and therefore not already planned into budgets, that's over these amounts, that they will need to go to the new shadow authority. So at that stage, it could be the shadow authority or the joint committee and check those things out and get views before they make any commitments. So it's the intention is to avoid doing things like a council making a massive investment with a big borrowing cost that then gives a new authority that may not have wanted to do that, this borrowing that it then has to fund when it may have not wanted to do it. Section 24 directions generally are issued around 2 or 3 months after a structural change order is laid. So for us, December next year, probably around that time is when we can expect that type of direction to come through, which would be before we had shadow authority because the elections wouldn't be until May the following year. So again, to just put some in context of what order that comes in and what different phases will start to feel like as we go through. So the first phase, the bit we're in now, so there's a period between submission of business cases and the government giving us a minded to decision in March. So what will it feel like in that phase? Actually, it's the stuff we've just talked about. It's the getting ready for transition, starting to do planning, irrespective of what the decision is, working together as a system to get us there. That's what this theme will feel like. Then we'll move into a slightly different feel. So then when we've got the minded to decision, actually what we're heading up to is the structural change order being laid. So that period is probably going to be defined by negotiation with government on what goes in the order, trying to get to a position on what's an appropriate number of elected councillors and divisions, you know, who lead authority or authorities should be, who gets seats on what. There will be a lot of negotiation and discussion to do there, as well as making sure things we know for Norfolk that need to be protected through the order are picked up by the government. Then we'll move into a very big period of, okay, the SCO's been laid, we've done that negotiation, now what we're heading for is election to the shadow authority, so that's the next big step. So in this period, we'll have the SCO is laid, getting ready for elections, standing up a joint committee, doing the real big piece of work around implementation plans and planning, getting everything ready for a shadow committee that's ready to go. And then the period after that is the, okay, so now we've had the elections, we're standing up the shadow authority. Again, we've got to move things along. Vesting day will be getting very close. And we'll be in earnest planning things like closing down councils. After vesting day, so work won't stop. We might have a little hooray on the Saturday when we've all been able to log in and it works. After vesting day is when you would expect the main bulk of transformation activity to start. So whilst we all want to do loads of transformation activity because there's a real opportunity to do it, the focus until then is absolutely going to be on how do you build a safe and legal authority for day one. If there's capacity to do more than that, that's great and we can add it in. But don't underestimate the capacity we will need to do that. Therefore, when we get to vesting day, we've then got the opportunity to start to program in, plan for, and carry out all this transformation activity that we want, that we need, and that we've got the opportunity to do. So, you know, I wouldn't expect the bulk of that to happen before vesting day. The capacity will be after vesting day for us to do that. And of course, don't forget, during that period, existing councils have existing responsibilities, nothing changes, service needed continue to run. Learning from other authorities, that is, if you take your foot off the gas with some of your existing services, what you do is you build up big problems for your new authority or authorities later on. So, you know, we don't want to stop scrutiny, for example, or audit, or all of those good checks and balances that we can, and services need to continue, and we need to continue to plan for the future as well. This isn't about stopping thinking about Norfolk's future. We need to do both things at the same time. No test today. I don't think we'll come back with a test, don't worry, but happy to take any questions, and hopefully that's helpful to just give you a window to what the next phases will look like, what the key governance arrangements will be.
Thank you. The leader wishes to come back.
Can I just say that while we've been sitting here, I've had an email from Alice McGovern, and the consultation actually opens later today and will run till the 11th of January, just so you know, and links will be provided to that.
Thank you. Hot off the press. I've got a couple of hands up. Just a question from me first. Just a key part of this is around the joint committees and when that is formed. I was just wondering, in terms of what practices from elsewhere about how they are scrutinised, for want of a better word, what models are we looking at on that? Because that's clearly something which this committee will be very interested in.
That we've had the same question, to be honest, so we're having a look. What we think is it depends on who the host authorities are, and it depends, to be honest, on which model is chosen. So in a single unitary model, you would expect us to make a pragmatic decision that actually maybe we could use the existing scrutiny arrangements. at least until shadow authority time, when I think the arrangements are very different, and we could probably make pragmatic arrangements in a 2 or a 3 where one of the host authorities takes that on. Equally, we're just starting to think about what external assurance you can get when we make those decisions to make sure they're the right decisions. It's the right question because we've had the same question and we haven't quite worked our way through to an answer yet, but we are talking to others to see if we can get to a view.
Thank you. So I'd raise that now just so we can all be thinking about it. I've got Councillor Morphew, then Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chair. And in terms of the consultation, I understand that the consultation is going to be on all 3 models. And if the consultation's now open, that means that the Code of Practice on publicity during the consultation period is also live, which means that we are restricted as a council in what we can do. And no doubt the monitoring officer will send round some advice on that in due course. In terms of the paper today, though, I think that's incredibly useful. Thank you. I think that's organised my thoughts a little bit. One of the areas which is of concern to me, though, is the between now and the transitional phase, because whilst there's a lot of mechanics in there, what I'm not clear about is what the member oversight is between now and when we get to transition, because clearly we're going to be interested in the running of this council right the way up to the point where it's not going to be run, and also about how the kind of transitional arrangements are going to be put in, because this is going to affect the people that we represent or who we hand on to be represented by others. So our oversight of the local government reorganisation activity up to that point, and the role of select committees in that, I think, is going to be very important, so that we understand that. And I'm also concerned, as we do that, that we make sure that the public are clear about how we're handling it and what we're doing as we go along as well, because what we know is we're getting already an awful lot of questions, often not necessarily best informed questions, and it would be really helpful that if we are going to be debating these things in public, that the public do actually have access to both the information and us debating that in ways that we haven't up to now. So is there a view about the oversight, and how can, I think from a scrutiny point of view, from this select committee's point of view, I think we need to tackle that fairly early on.
Thank you, Chair. So absolutely, we agree with you, and this is the start of a conversation, and what we didn't want to do today was to come to you and say, this is what we think the solution is. We want members to help form what they think is the right solution under any scenario, and as you say, around getting that balance right between looking after the host, looking after your host council, which, as Sarah said, is really where things have gone wrong, and we have to, it's like the Eye of Saruman thing, isn't it? It's, all the light goes on to LGR. Actually, the really important thing is keeping the business running, because we still have those statutory obligations. So we'll almost need to double up on scrutiny between existing work and LGR. We'd be more than happy for the committee to suggest how they'd like to think through some of this, whether that's a kind of member working group, whether that's slightly outside of this forum, but we are really happy to engage. And at the moment, we and districts are looking at what others have done, what went well. It's harder to find out what went badly. That tends to be on slightly more informal networks. But actually, between the Norfolk system, we are really starting to get a sense of actually what some of the models would really work for. We are also thinking around post the government's decision around how we communicate and with the public. So actually how we think about things like websites, how we provide some of that interim information so that if people are concerned or worried, there's a very clear method for them to contact us. We've had quite a few discussions, as I'm sure colleagues around this room have, with the voluntary sector, and they are particularly interested in understanding how transition happens and how we make sure we reflect all those needs. So again, we absolutely appreciate this perhaps is more policy development we're coming to you with and our ideas, and we'd like to work it up with members. Thank you.
Thanks, and I don't think we need to solve it today, but it's good that it's on the radar, and we're going to need to get into it. And 2 points arising from that. I think whilst we are looking at the oversight, we know that one way or another, whatever model it is, we're going to be working closely with the districts to try and achieve that. So there's going to need to be some sort of a mechanism. I fear how complicated it might get, so I think we probably need to work to try and find a relatively understandable and simple mechanism for achieving that, which does take into account all of the interested parties. And you mentioned the voluntary sector, and doubtless business and others will want to find a way of influencing the progress of that. And I think we need to try and see whether or not we can find a way of doing that. And certainly from a member point of view, the SCO is kind of interesting, and I think we would, need to keep an eye on what happens in the lead up to the SCO, because that's another year, which does give room for all councils to be creative, and we don't particularly want to see too much of that. So I think we probably need to think of a way of trying to influence that. Let's not be too strong in the language that we use. And in terms of the vesting day, it's quite right. It shouldn't be a cliff edge. It won't be a cliff edge. But if we have got a number of things that we need to sequence, then I think it would be really helpful for members to be able to express their view about where the priorities lie. Because with all due respect to officers, it may well be that the officers' choice of what they might prioritise might not be the same thing as councillors do. And I think we're going to be the ones, or the councillors who are elected, are going to be the ones on the ground answering for it on day one. So they probably ought to be in a position of influencing it from before day one.
Absolutely, and we are in that, at the moment, we are in that data gathering stage with partners from across the districts. As was on one of the slides, Sarah showed one of those work streams. We are, I think if it gives comfort, we as a system are working together well in Norfolk. That's not true everywhere else in the country. So actually those discussions are underway, that thinking is underway. Obviously the kind of crunch point and what we really need to help with the design is obviously the Minded to decision. I think once we've got that, that then really allows us to kind of get some of that governance in place. We do also have to balance, though, under all models, that delivering a safe and legal service. And there are a number of bits that already, we will need to put on the Joint Committee, the SCO's agenda for day one. And I think it's important that we work with members to explain why these are important and why we need decisions on them. Because absolutely there's some really big ticket stuff that people are interested in, but there's also some kind of real, kind of legal stuff that we need to make sure is in place first of all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just for leaders, just to try and pin you down just on something here, because clearly there will need to be a shape to member oversight of this, but at some stage we will need to make a decision about what that shape actually is. And I'm wondering where on the timetable is kind of the deadline and the point to try and pin us down to a particular month or 2 months as to when decision makers need to make a decision about what that is going to look like. And I'm conscious that as we're looking at the spring next year, we might have elections. We're currently scheduled to have elections, so that we'll be straddling that period, which leads to thinking about, well, actually, probably does the old authority need to pin that down as one of its final acts, I mean us as members, before an election, rather than leaving it to a newly elected council to figure out?
In lots of ways, it depends what the Minded to decision is and who the lead authorities are moving forward, who you expect to have lead roles in the negotiations. It'd be lovely to pin it down pre-election to get something done. Unfortunately, I think a number of things in the SCO are actually quite drawn-out, complicated processes to go through. So the number of councillors, for example, is going to require several months of work with the Boundary Commission. Government tell us that it normally takes 6 to 8 months to get an SCO ready, so it's not a straightforward document for them. What we don't have at the moment, which stops us from doing too much work on it, is we don't know what government might want to put in it. There are a number of styles they've taken. They've all got a similar format in what they do, but we don't know what approach they want to take. And to be fair to government, I don't think they know at this stage what approach they want to take. It wouldn't be unhelpful to set up a member working group from this committee if you wanted to, where we could talk through some of this stuff in more detail and start to get things ready. But I think fundamentally, until we've got a minded to decision and we know who lead authorities are going to be, who you would expect, whoever the lead authorities are, will want to grab hold of these things and lead, the amount of work we can get done is relatively minimal. But equally, there is a huge amount to be done on forward planning anyway, which we are getting on with.
Thank you. I'm always a fan of a member working group, but I'm not necessarily sure what it's going to be discussing and when. That's the problem. And I suppose it is a question of standing something up with a view to it discussing something in the future and not quite knowing what is a bit of a minefield.
And if it's helpful, we can certainly come back to this committee with a little bit more about what the next phases look like, and we could talk in more general terms. You know, a lead authority will need to be thinking about these things at this stage. You could bring something back more detailed in a very neutral way if it's helpful to help to flush that out. Equally, it helps us all move forward quite quickly when we have got that minded to decision. But that might be the next thing for us to bring through to you to have a look at.
I think, sorry, if I could just add, Chair, I think the risks, whether it's a 1, 2 or 3, are actually very similar. And we keep having to say these will be new organisations. So there are change risks attached to each of them. So the sort of areas that would need scrutiny and oversight for a new body actually are very, very similar. So I think we could set some kind of broad parameters through that whether it's 1, 2 or 3 scrutiny committees could have a look at. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware the leader is receiving things hot off the press, so I'm going to come back to you, leader.
No, there's nothing new or hot off the press. That came in at 10:28, actually, that email, which is interesting. But we don't know exactly the time it will be launched. So we're still in the OK zone at the moment, but it will be launched later today. I suppose they don't know when the button will be pressed. Just to let you know that we have a Norfolk Leaders Group that meets on a regular basis. So I get together all the district council leaders, and we're now putting that in 2 parts. So the first part is sort of business as usual. And the second part is going to focus on LGR, so that we're all in the same space, so that once we do know who those lead authorities are going to be, at least we're all at the same level, and so it should be easy enough to transition into that, well, hopefully. So we've already put that in train. So we'll try and do as much as we possibly can this side of it, but as you've seen, there is so much to do and so very little time to do it in. We're also watching Surrey very carefully, because Surrey are in the shoot slightly ahead of us. So Tim Oliver was extremely popular at the County Council Network a conference over the weekend, because everybody wants to know what he's being told by government, because we suspect that although they say you can't take this as a precedent, we expect that model will probably be repeated more or less as it is when it comes to the rest of us.
Thank you. Councillor Morphew.
A really useful conversation, I think, that. The timetable and the timing of all of this is going to be kind of complicated. I think we know that. But I think it wouldn't be a bad idea, actually, if we tried to bring something back to our December meeting, so that we're not having one in December, okay? Which kind of makes the point even more important. Because if the closing date of the consultation is the 11th of January, no idea how long it's going to take after that for anything to emerge. But we are going to be pushed to start from scratch at that point to try and set up something meaningful and get dates sorted out and membership and things. I wonder if we could at least provisionally get something organised so that we can stand it up quickly when we need to, rather than have to go back to scratch. I think we all know that it's not as clean and comfortable as we might want it to be, but if we can do something that's a bit messy so that we can get it stood up rather quicker, then I think that might help everybody.
Thank you. We'll hold that thought for the work forward plan item, which is coming next. Councillor Long.
Yeah, thank you. Section 24, direction. I mean, I'm just worrying how this will hamstring existing councils in delivering day-to-day services. I mean, if you take an example of a land disposal worth more than 100,000, I mean, you don't have a very large plot of land that's going to be for housing that doesn't attract a figure of more than 100,000, yet the government is pushing for delivery of housing and actually freeing up council-owned land on the land it's not due to develop is a way of helping to deliver government's aspirations. So that will put a hiatus on that. If a care provider pulls out of the market and we have to let a contract of more than £100,000 for care provision, non-capital, whole life costs, doesn't take many weeks to build up £100,000 care package. Are we going to be hamstrung by this, or will there be a way to circumvent on the basis that it's got to be right that we enter into bin contracts as districts when the bin contracts need doing, and sell land that's saying that, go ahead and sell off all the family jewels, but there are decisions that need taking to make to make operations function. And off the back of that is the section 24 direction also applicable to wholly owned council companies for the likes of entering into contracts for more than £1 million capital. When you're building 100 plus homes each year, that's a drop in the ocean. Will we have all those companies have to stop what they're doing? Bearing in mind they are separate legal entities, and will they therefore have to curtail building the hundreds of new homes that they're building in Norfolk? I'm thinking at least 100 are built by the housing company in West Norfolk. Repton are building homes. Other councils across Norfolk have housing delivery models in a similar way. That's business as usual and has been for some period of time. However, contracts with things like the building companies that actually do the physical work on the ground is way in excess of the figures that we're being presented with on the Section 24 direction. Is there flexibility? Would it be in something where, if the benefit was obvious to everybody, that government would allow a combination of all parties involved to allow these things to proceed? Because I can see nothing happening for 2 years in so many spheres of operation caused by, the ineptitude of the process.
Thank you. I think splitting that down, as far as the Section 24 notice is, what should we be worried about, what should we be a bit worried about, and what shouldn't we be worried about?
Yeah, I don't think you should be worried about any of it, to be honest. It sounds a big thing, but I wouldn't worry about it. So start at the end. Local authority-owned companies, would they be covered? No, as you say, they're separate legal entities. The government don't have the power to do that. The intention of this isn't to hamstring or stop. The intention of this is for people to make financial decisions with their eyes open and with the new authority or authorities knowing exactly what's happened. So again, anything in your medium-term financial strategy, which is most of our spend, I look at Harvey, most of our spend, will not be covered by this direction because it's already planned into our budgets, so it's new stuff. You're quite right, you would expect, a new shadow authority, who no doubt will be made up of a number of members of the existing authorities at that point anyway, because elections will cross over, to come to the same conclusion as you, where spend is in the best interest of Norfolk, it needs to happen. We just need to work out the process by which we do this that doesn't add months and months in, which it shouldn't do. And you'd expect shadow authorities to get reports with a number of things in. Here's a lump of stuff for this month for you to have a look at. Is that all okay? So I don't think it's something you should be worried about. Other authorities haven't told us this has been a major issue for them at all. It's an extra bit of admin and transparency, but other than that, that's it. So I definitely don't think anyone's going to be hamstrung by anything, as long as what they're doing is in the best interest of the county.
I'll sleep well in my bed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Thank you, Chairman. I think what was just been said there emphasised the need for the continuing joint working, because the leaders just mentioned the Norfolk Leaders Group. Well, that's been in existence quite some time. We've got the joint committee, or committees as the case may be, which will come through as well. And the chairman made the point about setting out something ready for post-May 2026. Well, I'm in agreement with that as well. I think, this is the right committee for it. And if this select committee continues post-May 26, which I assume it will do, then this is the right forum for it. There may be member working groups that come from it, but if we set that out as the intention of the way forward, to me that makes a lot of sense. And with the other joint working that's going on, then that sort of hopefully emphasises the way the process should be unwind. And also this point about the section 24, it does say on the slide, written consent from the successor councils. So once the government has laid the order, then it's up to the successor councils to do the working together. So I think this is really going to be the big issue. But I suppose really what I'm trying to get to now is come 2027, what a confusion. The existing councils plus the shadow authorities and all the rest of the stuff, and who is delivering what. So there will need to be quite a big communications campaign to make sure that people are aware of this in terms of service delivery and who's doing what. And a couple of detailed questions. Have we got anything on the consultation of how and the period? Is, I heard the 11th of January mentioned. Is that the end date? So it started. And how's the consultation actually happening? Is it just electronic or what?
As far as I'm aware at the moment, and I just skimmed through this letter, there is a link. And I haven't touched on the link yet because it's not live, so I can't really tell you much more than that. There's also a list of stakeholders they're going out to, but they're going to look at different categories of people, and I think they're going to assess the information that comes back in, depending on whether you're a town or parish council, or you're a resident, or you are the health service, for example. So I can't give you that, but we can let you have the link as soon as possible so that everyone can be cited on that. But it's only just been made official this morning.
Yeah, I suppose the point there really is to make sure it's as wide as possible. It's not going to attract a huge amount of attention, but then it needs to attract the attention. One other detailed point, Charter Trustees was mentioned and the error that was made. I think that was in Kent, wasn't it? And whichever it was, but do we know that those arrangements are actually taking place? Because they do take some time to set up and to make sure they do actually work as well.
I'll do Charter Trustees first. So we've highlighted it in our own business case, and actually government have made commitments all the way along that they want to protect things like the mayors and those other arrangements. We can't put those arrangements in place until you get to vesting day, because actually Charter Trustees are made up of elected members who are in that division. But it's absolutely one of the top things on our list to make sure the SCO covers, so we don't forget about it. Just quickly to touch on the consultation, although I haven't read the email yet, but we've got a pretty good idea of what it's going to be. So it's a statutory consultation from government. So what they will do is publish a list of named consultees. They'll essentially say, we are consulting with these people, but we have opened up our consultation for anybody else to respond to. So anyone else can respond to it, but they will have published a list of statutory consultees. They'll call them named consultees. It's an electronic consultation through a citizens portal. So you can go online and do it. Anyone who can't get online or wants some help can come into our libraries, and all of our libraries are ready to help people with the PCs in libraries, to direct them there, to help them access the consultation in that route. We've also got copies of all three proposals in County Hall and the District County Town Hall and the District Town Halls. So anyone who wants to access a paper copy can just make contact and we'll book a room for them. They can come in, they can examine all the paper copies, and again, we'll help them get online if they need to. And we've got accessible documents as well as the documents that you've seen. We've got them in accessible versions online.
Just one other point on the company ownership, because if the authorities are abolished, then there's a hard stop there. But then I think you mentioned in the presentation about there'll have to be a runoff for the accounts to be agreed. So would there be some sort of runoff period as well for bodies to remain in existence when they've got a controlling interest of a company? Otherwise, the company situation is going to be a nightmare come the 1st of April 2028, especially if it's on a Saturday.
So there are processes before. We're not the first authorities to have wholly owned companies. And in some ways, they'll be treated in the same way services will be. If it's a 2 or 3, and we were to look at splitting some of our companies, there would need to be discussions around actually how they're split. Is it on a share basis? Do they continue? So companies will need to prepare for all of those, for the 1, 2 and 3 scenario, but then it will be up to the SEO, the Shadow Authority, ultimately will start to indicate what their preferred direction is once they've been vested.
Yeah, but again, that preparation will need to be joint because it'll be the shareholder that will be determining it, which will be the new authorities, as opposed to the companies, because the companies may say, well, this is what we'd like, but then the new authorities will say, no, 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 this is what we like because we're the shareholder. So that obviously needs to be looked at in perspective, doesn't it?
So I don't disagree. I think it'll be around putting a range of options from closure, I guess, to expansion and everything in between to the various bodies. And it, as you say, it'll be the shareholder. So the Shadow Authority, that will become the new councils, that will ultimately make that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting information. Just sort of pick up on the sort of scrutiny and transitional process. You know, I do agree that really you have to get to this minded to stage to kind of identify how this committee or working group could then continue that process moving forward. And so I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here. So this is kind of to officers, and the leader might want to comment too. But, you know, we've had it, you know, good governance, good scrutiny requires continuity. And, you know, there is a process ahead of us, you know, over the next couple of years. And there is an argument out there to not have elections, which is in the gift of the government, not in this council. And I know this was raised by some councillors at full council about different councils lobbying the government to postpone elections, and the leader was adamant not to. But from a sort of a risk and continuity governance perspective from officers, if elections do go ahead and you have a large cohort of new councillors, inexperienced councillors, is this identified as an area of risk in your documents? And as I say, I mean, the leader may have a comment on this as well. But to return to the minded to point, you know, and with continuity of, you know, this committee with a lot of experienced councillors, I don't think we can really start to do anything until March. And I think it would be a benefit of Norfolk if certain members were still here following, you know, the May process to see this process through and consistently. But is it an identified risk?
So we never describe you as a risk councillor, but I think we all need to kind of recognise that regardless of what happens post May and post March, we are all going to go into a period where we are going to need to learn how to do things differently. I've worked in a district and a county before, and whatever the outcome is, we are all going to have to accept that there's going to be actually huge knowledge. It's a really steep process of learning at a time, as Sarah said, when we have to keep services running, we have to keep some of the budget savings ticking in. We've got devolution going on, so it is a really busy period. And I think the honest answer is that regardless of what happens with elections, we are thinking around actually what training, what support we put in place so that actually we can help upskill officers. And actually I will go officers at all levels, as well as members. So, and of course we see a kind of natural changeover of members anyway, as people move on, resign, whatever. So we just need to make sure that there's an appropriate level of training and support. We are at the early stages of that, and we're at the early stage, and we're at the early stage of discussions as to what that might look like. But actually, that timescale fits pretty well with us. Assume, and we do assume a government decision in March, and then elections in May. Thank you.
Councillor Price, you wish to come back? Councillor.
unless the leader has any comment on that, but I think that's fine. I think the only comment I would say is that I think that's a pragmatic way of taking it forward and to upskill everybody in these new areas. But I think I would reiterate the point of continuity. And if you have no business would remove all of its experienced staff if it was just about to do an amalgamation with another company, for an example, because nobody would have any historical knowledge. So, I think upskilling and preparing members of all levels of experience is important, but I do think a continuity of understanding and experiences is a benefit to this council, notwithstanding, I'm not advocating for a postponement of elections, but it would be interesting to see what the government come up with and if and when they make their mind up.
I think not putting words in the leader's mouth, I think the attitudes of any politician or leader when it comes to elections are bring it on. We always want to fight elections, so politicians, even if our eyes aren't quite saying it, the public view is bring it on. We all want to face the electorate at any opportunity. Leader.
I will say, I mean, Steve Reed's been asked this question many times, and you never can quite nail him down. He was asked by a reform leader at the LGA, which I witnessed, and he basically said the democratic right of the public is something that has to be primary, and we're all aware that people have a democratic right to vote, and whether they choose to go to the polling station or not is up to them, and whether we were able to engage them enough is up to us. But you do have to think about the complexities, and so they will be thinking about that. And also, as you said, the continuity, because it will make our officers' life quite a lot harder, because we're not just having a new cohort of councillors, and we know a lot of our councillors will possibly retire, but also the lead up to the election when you're in that purdah period and all sorts of stuff can't happen. So it's another layer of complexity. But whether the government will choose to go for another postponement, I can't tell you, and I don't think anybody can. We are prepared for an election. Officers are gearing up for an election. My party are certainly ready with leaflets and candidates and everything in place. And I would suggest that anybody who doesn't do that is really going to be very much behind the times, because we don't know what will happen. We have to assume they will happen unless we're told otherwise. But I think the cut-off date is about the 23rd of February. So if we haven't heard by the 23rd of February, they're definitely happening. But I think the government got a lot of navel gazing to do between now and then and decide what's best. But either way, we'll have to deal with it.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Moore for you.
Thank you, Chair, and so say all of us on the elections. I think let's have a decision so that we can get on with it one way or another, please. Just wanted to go back to the comment about whether or not wholly owned companies are covered by Section 24. I'm looking at the monitoring officer because I'm not sure whether or not that's absolutely true. Aren't wholly owned companies treated as council entities for most purposes and so would be covered? I don't know the answer to that, which is why I'm genuinely looking at you for an answer.
I'll double check and get back to you, but my understanding was they weren't covered when we had a look at this before, but I'll send a note round to the committee if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the risks, and bearing in mind we don't know what way the government's going to go, but keeping children's services and adult social care safe and legal, the safety and safeguarding, were there to be more than one council, if there were to be two or even three, you'd be looking at 3 sets of children's services departments and 3 sets of adult social care with new lines of management. What sort of thinking is going to go into that? Because presumably you'd have to recruit quite a lot more people. And looking at the issue of council tax harmonisation, is that going to be included in the consultation so people might, see the full picture? And you're talking with the district leaders. And this is going quite well, I understand. But looking at things like assets and liabilities, are there any discussions around those, apportionment of what costs might be if they're been a particular road in one area, where how that would work out on a county-wide basis, and also things like assets. For example, town halls that might be empty, were there to be one authority. How are you progressing with all of that? Because I think the public would like to know, and also terminology, because we're talking here about a shadow authority, and I think that sort of chills me to the bone. We'll be talking about running a shadow authority. The public is going to say, whatever is that? It doesn't sound very accountable or open. Is terminology being thought about? Because I think there needs to be, we need to win over the public that we want to keep them voting. We don't want them to be turned off, and they're going to be asked to vote for an elected mayor quite soon. And that's going to put people off. They'll think, what does an elected mayor do? But shadow authorities, that really does worry me. So I've put quite a few points there. Could you answer them, please?
Shadow authority, don't disagree with you on the terminology. Not our terminology, is the government's terminology. And of course, the shadow authority can call itself what it wishes to once it's elected. So it could call itself a, interim council, implementation board, executive committee. It can use whatever name it wants, but in the meantime, we're using government's terminology. On council tax harmonisation and consultation, no, that's not covered in the government's consultation. The consultation is on the proposals that it's received. But of course, the shadow authority, in setting their budget, will need to consult on their budget, and their budget no doubt will need to set out, because it will be the first one, what their approach to council tax harmonisation will be, and therefore what assumptions have made, so the public will get consulted at that time. On all the other points you raised around the service issues, I think it's fair to say that all of the proposals have set out their views on how they see services moving forward and what they see the risks are. And that's exactly what government are going to consult on at the moment, the proposals. We've done the same in the County Council's proposal. We've proposed a single unitary, but also set out very clearly what we think the risks of disaggregation of services are. We are not at the stage in the programme where us, even internally or with our district partners, are doing really detailed work around what that looks like. We're in the very early stages of transition when we might start to think about some of the key points that need to be considered. Once we get to minded to decision, things will change and our planning will take a very different direction. But as I said before, there is an awful lot to do anyway around discovery, data, getting things in the right place. But in terms of your specific question around the risks of disaggregation, they were included in our proposal to government. So I think they're very well set out from the council's point of view.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Just to come back on the point about the assets and liabilities, in the position that maybe there was one council, what would the position be with community assets, things that had been given to the town by various? Would they be sort of claimed, or would they be allowed to stay? Would they go to a town council? Has there been any thought about that?
Again, it would depend what the government's decision was and to what model. What we've set out in the county's proposal, I mean, fundamentally all the assets will go to whichever council covers the area, would be your starting point. What we've set out in the unitary proposal from the county council is we want to be able to talk to town and parish councils about opportunities for them as part of this process to get ownership of some assets or ownership of some services. So building on the work that's done with parish councils at the moment, we delegate authority around verge cutting to around 75 plus parish councils. That works really well for us. We passed on what it costs us to the parish. Actually, the parish take really good community ownership and give us a good service and quite often add on and top that up. What we've set out in our proposal is we want to have conversations with town and parish councils that have that appetite about opportunities for them to do more of that type of thing and take on assets where it works for them. We have got a huge number of town and parish councils. The appetite differs variously, significantly across that group, and some will have that appetite and some will not have that appetite. So they're conversations to pick up later. But what we've said is a commitment in a single route unitary to have the conversation.
Thank you. We're not going to get into a discussion about the implications on verge cutting of any of these proposals. So I'm going to start to bring this item to a close, and our task today is to consider the briefing from officers on the core decision-making elements anticipated as part of the local government reorganisation process. What we've done this morning is we've kind of identified some known knowns and some known unknowns, probably quite a lot more of the latter in terms of how we're moving forwards on this. We've had some clarity around the Section 24 notices and the implications of that, some issues around the consultation and the form that will take. We've talked about the charter trusteeships and when they need to be sorted out. And we've had a lot of discussion around future scrutiny arrangements and structures for member oversight. Now, in terms of any kind of recommendation flowing from this, I think it seems natural that until directed otherwise, this is the correct body as far as member oversight is concerned with this from a strategic point of view. This is the committee for that. It's in the title. What we might want to consider as part of our next item, the forward work programme, is thinking about those touch points where this committee will come back to that. Any other thoughts or recommendations at this stage? In which case, are we all agreed? Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Leader and officers, for that. In which case, we move to item 9, the forward work programme, which is in front of you, and I'm going to ask Mr. Hopper to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So with your permission, I will go a bit back to front here and look at the two actions first, because I think there's a lot of discussion for committee to have around what's coming up in the forward work programme, given the points that have been raised today. So first of all, if I just draw committee's attention to the copy of the policy framework that has been circulated again to committee and has been circulated to the other select committees as well, just to note that that view to include the cabinet member view has now been included. So that's just for committee to note. Secondly, we were just going to discuss working groups. That's set out in Appendix B. There was discussion today during the fire assurance item over whether or not the Strategic Development Oversight Group still needs to fulfil its current purpose, or whether under the new governance arrangements the Strategic and Corporate Select Committee can fulfil those scrutiny needs. And I think there were views from Councillors Proctor and Price that that's best done here at Strategic and Corporate Select Committee. So sort of over to committee to just decide on that formally so that then we can take that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Proctor.
Just two points following up on that, and Chairman, we do have in the January meeting an update on devolution proposals. I would suggest we ought to add LGR to that as well. The agenda is not heavy in terms of the numbers of items on there, so to my mind that would be a worthwhile touch point for that. And second point, just while I've got the floor, is we should be reviewing the Constitution as part of the remit of this committee, so we do need to add that in at some point in the work programme.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy.
I wonder whether we should make devolution and LGR a standing item on the agenda, actually, because I can't think of a meeting where we're not going to want to discuss something about it. What we actually put in to discuss might be different, but I think we need to make space for it rather than try and crowbar it in later on. In terms of working parties and groups, I'm very tempted to suggest we scrap the lot and start again, actually.
Okay, let's deal with the forward work programme first on that. And I hear what you say about LGR becoming and devolution essentially becoming a standing item. I suppose the only time when that might not really apply is February, when really the budget takes precedence. So perhaps we factored it in for both January and March in terms of updates, so we've got touch points on our future work programme. That would work. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Murphy?
It does, except that I'm just slightly anxious that as with all of these things, the government probably won't take any notice of the fact that we're grappling with the budget for when they make announcements for things that we need to talk about. So we may need to make provision either to fit it in around the budget, or alternatively at least put on the radar we might need another meeting. I'm reluctant to make those suggestions, but I think the reality is that the workload from all of this is going to creep up on us, and if we're not careful, will overwhelm us at short notice.
I think that's a reasonable point and reflects political reality. So perhaps we treat it that essentially LGR becomes a standing item on the work programme as we go forward. You wanted to come in?
Thank you. Yeah, noted. I think that was the other point I was going to raise when looking at Appendix A, is that we've got items we know we need to add, and we know about 26 to 27's meeting schedule. So if okay with committee, I will circulate a work programme after this meeting that includes that schedule. And we can also look at whether there's need to book any additional meetings on that basis.
Thank you. I'll come to you in just a moment, Councillor Price. The other point I was going to make just about the fire item and the role of ourselves in scrutinising that. And the point was made earlier about when are we going to be looking at performance across NFRS, and also there were the additional items around the action plans on Grenfell and Manchester Arena. I would suggest that we looked a timetable ahead in the pipeline for this, perhaps finger in the air in 6 months' time, which might not be us, it might be a new committee that are getting their teeth into that, but certainly that we get that into the pipeline. Councillor Price.
Well, yeah, it's just a point noting that our meeting date is 18th of March 2026, and could officers remind me what the minded to date is to be? And if that's like a week later, perhaps we should be, you know, moving that meeting till later in the month so we can hit the ground running. It's nothing worse than doing a committee meeting a week before something big happens and then you're not dealing with it for 2 months, you know. It's so I think, you know, it's plenty of time to move meetings around. But yeah.
I think we take a watching brief on that, because there's the risk that you also run into the politically sensitive period as and when elections are happening, so that there perhaps will be a sweet spot in March as to when we actually hold that meeting.
Is there an exact date for the minded?
No. If anyone's wants to read the tea leaves on that, I think is for them. Okay, so with those additions then, standing item of LGR and the fire item in about 6 months' time, we can send around the forward work programme, which then leads us to the working groups. The Constitution as well. The Constitution as well. When are we suggesting we should have that?
Where we are at the moment, then we're going to be struggling to get it into the January or March meeting, so probably going to be one of the first ones of the 26-27 series.
Yeah, I think that's one for the pipeline as well. And as I say, once we have that schedule of meetings down on our work programme, we can look at allocating dates.
We're happy to back that off for whoever is successful in May 2026 to grapple with. That's absolutely fine. Right, let's come to the working groups then, which we've got in front of us. So there is the Norfolk Fire and Rescue Service Strategic Development Oversight Group. We've got the Norfolk Against Scams Partnership. We've got the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Performance Board that currently sit underneath this committee. Does anyone have any views or recommendations that they want to put forward about those? Councillor Morphew.
I'm not disputing the importance of any of them, but I am not sure when I actually last saw anything come from any of them or what they do, and I'm not sure how they fit within the existing setup that we've got and how they're likely to go forward into the future. So I think I would like to see them. I was a little bit brutal in saying I want to see them scrapped and start again, but I actually do think that we should look and see whether they are serving their original purpose and whether they should be reviewed to serve the purpose going into the future. So how we tackle those as issues, I think it's important, but not necessarily as working groups in the kind of anonymous way that they've been functioning over the last however long it's been. I'm not sure I actually knew about. No, I won't even go there. But, you know, I'm surprised, given the scrutiny beforehand and the select committee now, that we haven't seen any reports of them in public. So I think that probably says a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Long.
I think if they're wholly in our gift, looking at some of them, the work that they do, I suppose, is allied now to this committee because the terms of reference have changed. And so, you know, I don't disagree with Councillor Morphew, which is a really rare occurrence. So, you know, you probably need to chalk that one up and write it down somewhere. But if there's a proposal that we, you know, move them all aside from this committee, or at least go back to those people that chair the different groups and perhaps asked for a report to come before we make that decision, but at least put them on notice that that's our consideration.
I think we'd certainly need an updated terms of reference on the first two of them, and that's cited within the report. Perhaps this is something we could bottom out next time, but if we ask the lead officers and chairs to come back to us as part of a report for that one. I have to admit, I think that the fire one, much as it's been important in the past, that was because scrutiny of the fire service didn't naturally fall anywhere within the select committees previously. So that was rather filling a gap. That gap doesn't necessarily exist anymore. So that perhaps might be one which can be revisited. Anything I've missed?
No, that's helpful. Thank you. It's just for me to come back with a report on the functions of those groups, I think, and then committee can decide from there. Thanks.
Thank you. So bearing that in mind, are we all agreed? Thank you very much. What we'll then do then is come to item 11. Where am I looking? Is to introduce yeah, sorry, item 10, sorry. Side up item 10 with item 10, local government reorganisation preparing for transition, update on planning and decision-making context. We've done that one. I thought we had. That got me confused. Right, item 11 then. Is the Norse report, which, so where we are, so exclusion of the public. Well, first we have the report moved, don't we? So Norse Group Business Plan Update, we will ask the Strategic Director of Finance to move that report, and then we will move to the exclusion of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the report is just a short covering report for the item that is in terms of the exempt appendix, and the exempt appendix, officers have considered the information in the exempt appendix, and in accordance with paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, assessed that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. The reason for this is the information is commercially confidential, and the report is has been brought to you today as a result of a previous request from the committee and was on your forward plan. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think in terms of process, I have to ask the committee if it's content to move into private session. That's agreed. So we end the stream, please, and we ask any members of the press and public to leave. Thank you. So we have considered the exempt items. What the Select Committee has been asked to consider and review the 25 to 26 Norse Group business plan and providing any recommendations through to Cabinet. The only recommendations which we have come through is primarily to ourselves as a committee and as a scrutiny structure, and that is the need for increased oversight as far as changes to care provision is considered in the future, and also with regard to any disposal of properties and about how that is scrutinised. Now, with regard to where we go next on that, we note that our next meeting on the 21st of January, we have our own review of companies' governance item on our work programme. We would also need to carry out some discussions with the chair of the Adult Social Care Select Committee, the committee which covers that, with regard to where that would sit within its own work programme, those items which we've discussed today. Are we agreed with that committee? Thank you. In which case, my only remaining thing is to thank very much Justin and Zoe for the very detailed presentation which you've given us this morning, and your answers to some of the knotty questions which members have raised. That concludes business for today, and our next meeting is on the 21st of January 2026. So a happy new year, everybody, and I look forward to seeing you at that next meeting. The business is closed. Thank you.